In a quiet corner of the countryside, there was a small village where the fields stretched wide but the money ran thin. The soil was tough, and the people worked hard just to make enough to live. Around this village stood tall, shiny mansions, homes of the rich and powerful, far from the dust and sweat of the farms below. Among the villagers was a man named James. He was a farmer, simple and kind, with hands worn rough from years of working the land. James loved his farm and the family he cared for, but the years had been unkind. Crops failed, bills piled up, and his neighbors often whispered that the farm might be lost soon. Still, James never gave up. He rose early each day, hoping for better luck. Not far from the village, a woman named Victoria lived in luxury. She was from the city, dressed in silk and diamonds, her laughter loud and sharp. Victoria looked down on the villagers, especially James. She saw his worn clothes and dusty boots and called him useless. At a gathering one evening, she mocked him openly, laughing at his simple life and the struggle he faced. But beneath her mocking smile, there was more than met the eye. Behind James's quiet strength and Victoria's sharp tongue, a story was waiting, a story of pride, secrets and unexpected twists that would change everything. Victoria loved to remind everyone of her place in the world. At every chance, she flaunted her wealth, the way her dress shimmered under the sun, the sparkling rings on her fingers, and the stories of her expensive dinners and exotic trips. She talked loudly, making sure everyone heard about the parties she attended and the powerful people she knew. At the village gathering, Victoria stood in the center, a glass of champagne in her hand, her voice cutting through the quiet evening air. She laughed as she looked at James, who stood quietly near the edge of the crowd. "Look at you," she said with a sneer, "still working that tired old land, barely scraping by. What good is a farmer like you? You're nothing but a joke." Her laughter echoed, sharp and cruel. Some villagers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. James kept his eyes on the ground, not angry, but hurt. His heart was heavy, but he said nothing. Victoria's words stung, but beneath the surface, something deeper was stirring inside him, a fire of hope and quiet determination. Victoria wasn't just mocking James, she was showing the world her power. She believed money made her better than everyone else. She thought her shiny life could buy respect and fear, but there was one thing Victoria didn't know: sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who struggle the most. As Victoria's laughter faded into the night, the villagers wondered what would happen next. They didn't know it yet, but this moment was just the beginning of a story that would turn their world upside down. After the gathering, James returned to his farm. The sun was low, casting long shadows over the fields he had worked for years. His hands were tired, his back sore, but he didn't complain. This land was all he had, and he cared for it like it was part of his family. Each day James woke before dawn. He fed the animals, watered the crops, and fixed the broken fences. Sometimes, when the work was done, he sat on the porch and looked out at the fields, thinking about the future. It wasn't easy. The farm barely made enough money to cover the bills. The weather hadn't been kind, and some seasons had been worse than others. James's wife had passed away years ago, leaving him to raise their young daughter alone. She was his reason to keep going, his hope when the days felt dark. His neighbors often saw him carrying buckets or repairing tools, always with a quiet strength they admired. But there was something no one knew, a secret James had kept close to his heart. Beneath the surface of the hard soil lay something valuable, something hidden for generations. His grandfather had told him stories about it, but James never believed they would come true. One evening, as James checked the fence, a letter arrived. It was from a company he didn't recognize. The letter spoke of land surveys and mining rights. It said the land James had farmed all his life was worth more than he ever imagined. James felt a mix of fear and hope. Could this really be true? Could the farm, the very thing that had caused so much struggle, become the answer to his prayers? As the sun set, James looked at the horizon. He knew his life was about to change, but how, he couldn't say yet. The village didn't know either. The secret buried beneath the earth was about to rise to the surface, and with it, a chance to rewrite the story for everyone. One quiet morning, the peaceful village was shaken by an unexpected sound. the roar of a helicopter, flying low over the fields. People stopped what they were doing, and looked up, shielding their eyes against the sun. The helicopter landed right in the middle of James's farm, its blades kicking up dust and leaves. Villagers gathered around, whispering in shock and curiosity. They had never seen anything like this before. The rich woman, Victoria, heard the news quickly. Her mocking laughter was replaced by sharp disbelief. She hurried toward the farm, her heels clicking against the dirt road, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. When Victoria arrived, James was already standing near the helicopter, calm but proud. A man in a suit stepped forward, and handed James a thick envelope. It was a contract. The company had bought the rights to mine the land beneath his farm. They had discovered valuable minerals hidden deep underground, something no one had expected. Victoria stared, her mouth open, as the reality sank in. The man she had called poor and useless was now the owner of a fortune she couldn't imagine. The villagers watched silently, their eyes wide with amazement. James didn't gloat or brag, instead he looked at Victoria with steady eyes. "This land has always been worth something," he said quietly. "I just never gave up on it." Victoria's face twisted with shock and something else, regret, maybe shame. She had been so sure of her power, her money, her status, now all of it felt fragile and empty in comparison. As the helicopter lifted off, James stood tall in his field. The man who had been laughed at was now a symbol of strength and hope, and Victoria. She realized too late that true value didn't come from wealth alone. Victoria stood near the edge of the crowd, tears running down her cheeks. But these weren't tears of joy or relief. They were tears of frustration and desperation. For the first time, her sharp laughter was gone, replaced by quiet sobs. She stepped forward, her voice shaky. "James, I didn't mean what I said before. I was wrong." But her words felt empty, like a mask hiding the real reason: fear of losing her place in the world. James looked at her calmly. He didn't smile, but there was no anger either. "It's too late for apologies," he said softly. "But I hope you learn something from this." The villagers watched in silence. Some had pitied James before, others had admired Victoria's wealth. Now, the lines between them had blurred. The man who had been looked down on stood strong, while the woman who had mocked him seemed small and lost. Victoria's tears slowed, but the pain in her eyes remained. She realized that money could not buy respect or kindness. She had judged James by what he didn't have, instead of who he truly was. James turned away and walked back toward his farm. He knew his life was changing, but not because of the money. It was because he had never stopped believing in himself and his land. The villagers began to whisper again, not about wealth or power, but about pride, strength, and the quiet courage it takes to stand tall when everyone expects you to fall. With the money from the mining company, James didn't change who he was. He fixed the broken fences, bought better tools, and made sure his farm could feed his daughter and neighbors for years to come. But more than that, he used his new wealth to help the village, repairing the school, supporting the elderly, and creating jobs for those who had struggled like him. Victoria left the village soon after. She was quieter now, her laughter gone. The experience had taught her a hard lesson, that wealth without kindness and respect is empty. She never returned to mock the villagers again. The people of the village looked at James differently now. They saw not just a farmer, but a man who had never lost hope. They learned that true strength comes from heart, patience, and hard work, not from fancy clothes or expensive cars. And the story of that day, when the helicopter landed in the poor farmer's field, became a memory the village would never forget. It reminded them all that everyone deserves respect, no matter their place in life. Sometimes the richest treasure is hidden where no one expects it, beneath the soil, beneath the surface, and sometimes beneath the pride we all carry.